Uh, by the way, welcome to My Views Are My Own podcast. If you're listening to this on a podcast app, please leave a 5-star rating or a nice review. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And that's all I'm going to ask of you guys. My guest today is Kavin Senapathy. Kavin Senapathy is an award-winning science journalist and author of the forthcoming book, The Progressive Parent: Harnessing the Power of Science and Social Justice to Raise Awesome Kids. A sought-after analyst and speaker, Senapathy's writing has appeared in Slate, Scientific American, Self, The Daily Beast, Salon, SciShow, Forbes, and more. What's up, Kevin?
Hello, Doug. How are you?
I am fantastic. We're we're trying new things. We're doing new stuff, and I'm glad that you're the one of the absolute first people that we're doing the whole like, hey, let's get into video and join the rest of the world.
Yeah, glad to be here representing for the elder millennials.
I'm a bit of a Luddite, and I was like, podcasts are radio, and they don't have video.
I
But here I am.
have a good friend that is very opinionated about podcasts too, and he says that he's like, it's not video. That's not the point.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, and well, and that was the thing is, but then I like just reading an article, and they were like, more people listen to their podcasts on YouTube than Apple and Spotify combined, and I was like, oh, maybe I should uh take those people into consideration when making podcasts. It's funny. I have this song stuck in my head. You know that song that's like, "Here I go again on my own."
Yes.
It's been stuck in my head because I keep saying, "Here I
Yeah.
go" while I'm starting this. Let's get to you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Your book is called "The Progressive Parent: Harnessing the Power of Science and Social Justice to Raise Awesome Kids." What was the inspiration for digging into this topic and ultimately writing a book?
Yeah, I would say this book is like 80% the culmination of everything I've covered in the last 10 years of my career of science writing and journalism. And it was about 20% assignment, like an assignment that I saw as a challenge and wanted to take on. And to start, I can say I was really happy to hear from, my publisher's been sending out early copies to reviewers and other people. And one person who reads a lot of parenting books said that this is not like any parenting book she's ever read. And so that's kind of what I was going for and kind of, I think, what the assignment really was. So it ties together all of these seemingly disparate topics and issues that are at the top of mind, not only for parents, but for anyone who cares about the future generation, right? And it uncovers some common threads between them. So if you look, I mean, just looking at the table of contents, um, it it starts out with talking about our worldview as people who identify as progressive. And I've spoken to a lot of people, and you might have encountered this yourself, but people are quite opinionated about the word progressive. I myself have certain feelings about it. And my publisher made a really good point, though, that the values that this book kind of lays out as what people who would consider themselves take to be true kind of tie together a quite varied and diverse group of people with, with all kinds of views, religious beliefs, cultural backgrounds, and so many of the other parts of our identities. What ties us together is the values that kind of underlie this book. And to take those values and lay them out, the book looks at this yard sign that went viral in 2016 after Trump was elected. This black yard sign with rainbow black letter font that some people might have probably seen, and it's
We believe
in this
in this
house.
house. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
In
yep.
in this
In this
house,
house
we
we
believe.
believe.
Yeah,
Yep, there you go. I don't know if I'm getting the order right, but it's Black Lives Matter, no human is illegal, science is real, love is love, women's rights are humans' rights, and kindness is everything, right? And I also have people also have opinions about this sign. Like
yeah.
some love it,
Seem
and
pretty reasonable sign. I mean,
yeah,
nothing on there
right.
sounds like controversial to me. Like,
Right. Some people would call it virtue signaling, and the book touches on this opinion as well. It kind of touches on
yeah,
all of the, the transparently talks about people's varied opinions on the sign. Um, but yes, at its core, it again ties, these are the values that tie what we call progressives in the book together. And what always stood out to me though about that sign is I believe everything that, on that sign, but science is real stood out as kind of distinct from the rest of them. And I always wondered, what does that mean to people as they display these values in their yards or on their bumper stickers?
yeah. I would
Um,
almost like to just to interject just a little bit there.
yeah.
I almost feel like that's slightly a bit of a modern kind of phenomenon of people feeling that by being conservative, it's like cool to say that you don't believe in science. And of course, there's always been like religious, let's just say just religious folks of certain sects that like there's that one religion where they don't let, and this is not just anti-vaccine. It was something like
Mhm.
it's been a kind of a controversial thing for like child abuse where they won't give
Mhm.
their kid a life-saving medicine
Mhm.
because they believe only the power of prayer could save the kid,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
if the kid dies, that's God's will. And that's here in America, and there's a lot of like
Right.
a lot of churches have that belief. That's always been around, but I think this widespread like MAGA like uh all vaccines are they're gonna make you gay, and they're gonna turn you into a mutant, like which I mean, to a certain extent, by their own logic, they're using that. Wouldn't science be in the vaccine? I don't. Okay, I'm done. I
Yeah.
digress.
No, all of these are really relevant questions when it comes to what the discourse around believing in science. You hear politicians say that a lot. And I kind of looked into the evidence we have to kind of characterize what people think about the idea that science is real, or whether they believe, what they believe about science. And I went into it, and it makes sense to think that there are these kind of swaths of people who don't believe in science. So the thing is, most people do believe that the scientific method is a thing, where you
Yeah,
have observation and experimentation and repeating and reproducing. But the the thing is, most people believe that that is real, and most people believe that, well, not most people, many people, the majority of people believe that the earth is a sphere, for instance. So
yeah,
I've been at the science marches holding up the sign that science is real. But when we dig into it, it comes down often to the question of consensus. So a lot of people I talk to say that believing in science is about believing in what the scientific consensus says. But for most questions that parents have when it comes to vaccines or chemicals or the environment or or how we feed our kids, um, the answers aren't as cut and dried. So that's to say that when we dig into what science is real means and look at a few questions and a few of the themes that occur in science, um, then we start to empower ourselves with kind of honing our worldviews.
Yeah. Do you mind if I share just quickly my favorite kind of anti-science person though? And
Yes.
it's not flat earthers in general because those actually if you dig deep enough, just like anything, a lot of those things, if you dig deep enough into flat earth, you reach Nazis in Nazism. It's always at the a lot of that stuff is always at the core of those conspiracy theories. But my favorite kind of flat earther are the ones who make homemade rockets and shoot themselves into the sky to prove that the earth is not round. That's just
Yeah.
for me. That is my personal favorite anti-science, especially because they're I mean they're using rudimentary rocket science, but they are using rocket science to shoot themselves into the sky, and I guess like take a photograph proving that it looks flat from whatever height they were able to achieve. I mean,
Yeah.
having been like in several airplanes in my life, and if you even from an airplane at like even at 30,000 feet, you can't necessarily see the curvature of the Earth. Like I don't know, it's
The flat earthers are certainly an interesting rabbit hole, and it's funny to think like they have explanations for everything. And so when I don't even know what their explanation for this question is, but I'm sure they have one, is what happens when you dig a hole.
flat earthers is like that's definitely a thing for like a lot of like indie rappers, like guys that like they're not really
Yeah,
that good at rap, but like they have like Ableton at home and they want something to rap about and they can't think of anything. So they think so flat earth is like that's their go-to. I'm gonna say that's like that's like the bread and butter of like indie rappers that don't have much subject matter or any life experience. They're like, well,
yeah,
yeah, well, the earth is flat.
right.
Not to mention,
And you,
there's a few pretty successful rappers that believe that too. I'm not going to name any names. I'm not trying to call anybody out right now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't want beef.
I would be happy to talk to any of those rappers, because it's always fascinating to
Oh,
me.
oh, they have conventions. You can go and they will
Oh,
freestyle with
yeah.
you. Oh yeah.
I would love to just be a fly on the wall. I mean, maybe if I have an opportunity in life to just check out the convention, I would do that. I would
Let's.
do that. What do you think? Would you do
I
it?
well, first of all, I'm gonna
Have you
invite you.
done it?
I'm inviting you on an adventure of a lifetime because one of the
Okay.
next this podcast we're going on the road. We're doing man on the street, and we're about to start hitting up some of the wackiest conventions we can get to, and really get to the bottom of just the American spirit. And yeah,
Yeah.
like I think this year we're just going to Dragon Con just for fun, but we're gonna definitely gonna. I mean, Dragon Con's like that's just comic book stuff. That's shit I'm already into. But we're gonna try and find some weird stuff and get out there and like explore it. So yeah, if I find a flat earth convention and you want to go interview some people, I'll let you know where it's at. We'll have the
Okay.
mics, we'll have the mics, we'll have the camera set up. We'll have lav mics so you can be across the room interviewing anybody.
Hmm.
Oh
Keep
shit.
me
I actually
posted.
I actually wrote an interview for you. I should just read the next
Okay.
question.
Oh, go. Because I could ramble all day about, I can talk about a couple of examples, but they'll probably come up in your questions. So shoot.
We will get back into science and you know I don't trust myself not to bring up flat Earth again, so let's just go ahead and assume it'll happen again.
Okay.
So, okay, there's some terminology
I
I
brought
want
it up in the first place, so that's my fault.
to to break down the title of the book.
Yeah.
For the first off, the goal of progressive parenting, like almost like what defines an awesome kid, but more like what are some of the traits or characteristics you would want kids to develop to become an awesome adult? Because that's our goal here, right?
Right. That's a great question. And it also was, I think, part of the assignment to talk about what that means. And I'll give a spoiler here. My book dedication is to my own kids, and it says to my kids who were born awesome. And the point is, this might seem a little bit, I don't know what the word is, shallow, but I don't think so. I think everyone is born awesome with a sort of a universe of potential and experience and perspective that's unique and awesome. And what our goal is to really help and make sure that all kids can thrive and be their most expansive selves. There's this one person that I interview in the book, and I'll let people read about her, but she's a researcher at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And she likes, this book talks about the work of researchers, educators, advocates, doctors, all kinds of people who kind of work to 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 ensure that kids everywhere can thrive, or to at least fight for kids everywhere to thrive, because frankly we know that a lot of children are not thriving and are struggling, um, for reasons that could be changed. But anyway, it's just it's helping all kids thrive is really the goal. I could go on about it all day, but it's about our worldview and kind of grasping and understanding what it means to be human in the first place, can kind of show us all of the possibilities that when we were growing up, we maybe didn't have, or all of the opportunities to understand who we really were. And so one of the big questions that the book delves into is what I call revealing the gender and sex lie. So I would say many progressives would say that they believe, as for the values on the yard sign, that they believe that love is love, and that people can love whoever they want, regardless of gender, and should have the same rights as cis het straight people. People would say that you should call people by their pronouns. Some people will call them preferred pronouns, but I just call them pronouns because your pronouns are your pronouns. But most or many progressives, and actually an increasing number of progressives, would say that it is the scientific fact is that practically everyone is biologically male or female. And they would boil it down to a term that is called 3G sex, and that is gonads, genitalia, and genetics. And so there's this idea that female humans have certain immutable traits and male humans have certain immutable traits. And gender is sort of about how you feel, whereas biological sex is about the way you were born. But what we learn, and what science has learned really just very recently, relatively recently, especially in the last 10 years, is that it's so much more complicated than chromosomes and genitalia and gonads. And we think of sex chromosomes as determining, our if we have a Y chromosome, we have typically male characteristics. If we have an X chromosome, we have two X chromosomes, we have typically female characteristics. And that's what it comes down to, and your sex is determined at birth. But it turns out that the book goes into this sort of nerdy history of scientists' knowledge of of the Y chromosome and sex determination. But the more scientists learn about the human genome and the genes on all of our chromosomes, the more they realize sort of how variable all of these different traits that we believe are tied to sex, how variable they really are, and how much they're influenced by all parts of the genome, not just these X and Y chromosomes, and influenced by so much in the environment. So not only are humans much more variable and prismatic than we've been led to believe and even taught to believe in biology classes, which are terribly outdated. Um, and certainly what we learned when we were kids is terribly outdated. But also, humans are so much more dynamic than we've been led to believe as well. So
Yeah.
that's just one answer to your question about kids being awesome. What does that mean is once we start to understand what they could be or what humans can be,
Yeah.
that gives us the capacity and kind of stance and worldview to help our kids be who they are.
Yeah, and to your point about uh just like education and for us and like the way it has been and and it was much worse for the generation before me as far as like any kind of uh progressive thinking in in a lot of ways when it comes to like for instance just talking about gender stuff like when I was in school, like I feel like the main thing they taught was like how can you be quiet and sit still the longest, and then
Yeah,
additionally, like just speaking of gender and like kind of like in the realm where even this is gonna sound silly, but I would say like the only place that I heard anything like that was when I watched Jurassic Park for the first time, and so all the dinosaurs are female. That's why they can't breed, and that's how they do population control.
yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
And of course, as Jeff Goldblum says, life finds a way.
Yeah,
The dinosaurs begin to breed, and
yeah,
there's a second scientific explanation for that. But I'm saying like, why did I have to learn that from Jurassic Park? Why can't like why couldn't they teach that in my be quiet sit still room I was in for 8 hours a day?
yeah.
Secondly, I want to bring up just in the modern era. This is something. Okay, this took me a while to learn because I don't know Latin, or I know very little Latin, and when people first started saying cisgender, I just took it as a new word. I didn't question it at all. I didn't go like,
Yeah.
"Oh, where does this word come from? What does this mean?" I was just like, "Oh, okay, cis, I get it. It means, you know, but you identify with the gender you were assigned at birth, whatever." Until Elon Musk, I bring him up a lot because he's a piece of shit and I hate him. But
Yeah.
he was he bought Twitter and then he said that saying cis is a slur,
Yeah.
and I was like, the fuck is he talking about? And I was like, what? And so that's when I actually asked a person who knows a lot, and I was like, yeah, what? Where did cis come from?
Yeah.
And they're like Latin, and I was like, oh, because trans is also Latin, so basically
Yeah.
it's just a fucking Latin word for same or whatever, and so yeah, so cisgender just means same gender in Latin. Uh, I sadly it took me a couple years after that word had been very popularized before I bothered to learn that it was a Latin word. Um, I don't know where I was going with that, other
Elon
than
Musk ruined Twitter, and I mean, this is why nobody likes him because I used to really enjoy Twitter, let me tell you.
me too.
I don't know if you've heard the saying that you never misgen or you never dead name people, never dead name trans people, but you can always dead name Twitter.
Yeah. Well, because what the hell is X ain't going to be around
Yeah,
for more
no,
than like
no,
another couple
we
weeks.
do not know what X. It's so funny. I remember, again, I'm an elder millennial, but this hasn't necessarily changed. And the book talks about education a little bit more. But I remember being in AP bio class 10th grade. So this would have been like 98, something like that. And my AP bio teacher, there's just so many myths that surround this idea of being male and female biologically, that you can't count all of them. There's so many. So my AP bio teacher said something about um, a female who bends near a wall and puts her head on the wall, with their waist kind of bent as close to 90 degrees as possible, and then put a chair under her. She should be able to pick it up, whereas the male will not be able to pick it up. Or it was the other way around. I don't remember.
This was a biology teacher.
Yes. And then he had all of us do it. I'll have to look this up, but I remember this very clearly. He had all of us do it. And whichever one the female was supposed to do, I think it didn't happen for me. Like I was the only anomaly, or like one of a couple anomalies. So then, basically we were the odd ones out. And it's so funny because I ended up realizing I'm non-binary, but still, it's just such a ridiculous
Yeah.
premise that yeah, like everyone, I think our age-ish needs to relearn biology and understand its complexity, and that will really kind of change the way you see your children, or the children in our lives. It was mind-blowing to me to start to kind of get an aerial view of how people see things.
Oh my god. But can I please share a biology story with you?
Yeah.
So this is 8th grade, I think. Or 7th grade. I don't know. So this girlfriend and boyfriend were passing notes in class, which is so not allowed. And obviously, you
Yeah.
fucking you what you ought to do is humiliate those kids. So our biology teacher, and she she was not a pleasant woman, just under any circumstances, but whenever she got a chance to really lash out at children, she really took the swing, and she got one of their little love notes, but this one was about how much they wanted to have sex with each other. So she read the note to the class, and she was, was reading the whole note out to the class, and, of course, so I was like, "Excuse me, um, what am I supposed to be learning here?" Like, and then I just had to go back to in school suspension, where I spent 90% of my time anyway, and then I got really good at drawing. So, you know,
Nice.
yeah, because they would give you like worksheets and write-offs, but the in school suspension teacher was like literally a zombie that was completely checked out. You
Kids these
could
days don't have I don't think they have that kind of core experience that we had of note passing. But I and my friend thought we were really cool and smart because we thought we were being mysterious, but we learned how to write in mirror image, which, fun fact, I can still do.
Oh,
And then
cool.
write each other notes in mirror image. Yeah.
That's
Well, that
amazing.
teacher is a jerk. I think about my jerk teachers too, and kind of like, not gonna lie, hope they didn't have the best time at life.
Like, there's no, any oh my god. Okay, one last thing before I ask you real questions about your book. I too was a note passer. See, kids these days don't realize you couldn't just text, but then I guess they could still s snatch your phone up and read your text, but so
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, it's actually easier to do what I did. Whenever I got caught passing a note, and this was my go-to, because I knew paper can't hurt you. Every time I caught passing a note, if the teacher caught me with it, took it, put it in my mouth,
Mhm.
and I swallowed it, and I was like, "What
I've
note?"
seen I've seen kids do that. I
I've
have.
done that on multiple occasions, and I was like, "I don't know what note you're talking about.
I
Where's your
should actually
evidence?"
ask my kid because they're not supposed to have their phone during class, so they put it all in a pouch.
That's good.
So they do pass notes. I haven't heard.
Kids must still pass notes. Okay,
Yeah.
what about a progressive parent? What is progressive parenting? Like, thinking about like prioritizing. What is a progressive parent prioritizing?
Yeah, see, prioritizing is really the word, but it's not in the way that you might think of it. So this book is it doesn't kind of promote any type of parenting style or even advise people what to do, what to feed their kid, what they should be buying as a good parent, or
Yeah,
not buying as a good parent. What it does do is kind of lay out the landscape and help people understand what might be in their power to do as parents to kind of create the best childhood they can create, and then what they might be worrying about that we're told to worry about as parents that maybe isn't really doing anything to help you, and we all need to take care of ourselves as well. So to help us take care of ourselves and our families, and then not only our families, but to care about our communities and children in general. And I think that is one thing that ties readers of this book together as well, is that we want to be able to care about everyone, and no one is free until everyone is free, and that's the same for kids. And
yeah,
so like an example of that is there is almost a whole chapter that talks about infant feeding, because what we feed our kids comes up a lot in parenting. And when we talk about consensus, for instance, consensus is a concept that the book delves into. Two parents of this day and age, and ever since the 80s and 90s, we've been told that it's sort of essentially scientific consensus that exclusive breastfeeding, which means no other food or drink other than human milk for the first 6 months of life, that exclusive breastfeeding is best, is scientifically proven to be better and to lead to better outcomes for kids now and into their futures. It's We're told that science has tied breastfeeding to everything from you know lower risk of certain types of cancer to higher income and educational attainment, and and all kinds of, a slew of like your typical health outcomes, so on and so forth. And the studies, or the reports and blog posts and so forth will say that breastfeeding, just breast milk, has these unique properties, and meanwhile formula is harmful. So the book sort of delves into the worry and the prioritizing when it comes to breastfeeding, right? So one one question of uh, again, prioritizing as a parent is, if you're someone who's given birth and then you're lactating, you essentially have a choice to make, right? You can either exclusively breastfeed, partially breastfeed, or not breastfeed. And that's sort of kind of a controversial statement. Some people would think, they would say, no, if you're going to give birth to a baby, what you should do is breastfeed your kid exclusively, because as the story goes, that's what humans have always done. But the book kind of delves into the truth about this, and this idea also that you hear a lot that formula costs money and that breastfeeding is free. And none of this is to let the government or the formula industry off the hook for being super problematic for a long, long time, for decades and decades. And there's there's a fascinating history that's relevant that the book delves into. So yeah, the formula industry and the government are problematic, but that doesn't make safely prepared, safely manufactured formula, that you can buy at the store and prepare correctly with safe milk unsafe. And it doesn't even actually lead to worse outcomes. So the book talks a little bit about, or talks quite a bit about um, why it's misguided to assume that when two things correlate, then that one of them causes the other. So if we there's one pediatrician I talked to who is quite pro what we call the Fed is best view. And there's actually an organization called the Fed is Best Foundation. And the two founders of that foundation actually just put out a book about Fed is best. And I would highly recommend it. Um, but what we find is that in the United States, people who breastfeed exclusively tend to be of a higher socioeconomic status and have um, all kinds of privileges that people who end up formula feeding don't have. And then there are also kind of confounding factors that muddy the data.
Yeah.
People who end up feeding formula often ended up having trouble breastfeeding. So that difficulty breastfeeding and the consequences of poor feeding in the first few days while trying to exclusively breastfeed also can lead to bad outcomes. And so uh, you can't, you, the book delves into when the discourse might be drawing a causal inference when it shouldn't be, when there hasn't been a
Yeah.
mechanism shown that actually causes better outcomes. And
So
so,
they don't take into consideration just so many things like with like time,
right,
a single mother, how much time they spend at work. And
time,
I,
bodily expenditure.
I feel like when you bring up false correlations, it's interesting how frequently false correlation in like medical science can be with one step, two steps, three steps traced back to capitalism
Yeah,
and
that's
inequality.
exactly what the book is about. We can end the interview now. I mean, that's I was
Oh
about
well, I was gonna say
that.
my parenting strategy for feeding though.
No, the
I'm a,
book, it comes down to like,
I'm
it
I'm a,
all comes down to capitalism. So there's a whole chapter, like you finished the interview, but there's a chapter all about race, ethnicity, and ancestry, and this idea again that these things are biological, and a lot of it comes down to capitalism. I'm digressing, but as one of the doctors I spoke with said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the way he said it was so good. Like I treasure that moment when he said this to me, but he said something like breastfeeding or not is not going to make the difference between your kid like pole vaulting for Yale and not making ends meet.
yeah, yeah,
There's this idea that it that it will, and that while, and I talk a little bit about my own experience, but while some people are in the early days of after having their kid, it's really stressful, and you judge yourself because you're told that all of this rests on your shoulders. And what a revelation that it actually doesn't.
yeah,
And so that's an example of how sometimes we're told that we need to prioritize something when really our energy could be, not to like say that people shouldn't try to breastfeed. It's great. Some people love it and it works for some people. But what we
yeah,
really need to be doing is looking at the systemic forces that actually lead to bad outcomes.
yeah.
And yeah,
Also,
capitalism.
I mean, yeah, capitalism 99% of the time, and also, some people just physically don't have the ability for whatever reason,
Yeah.
and that's this like heaping shame upon people for some, you know and yeah, like you said, the outcomes are they don't line up. It's not this is not it's it's
Right.
it's capitalism science, not real fucking science. But
Yeah, I mean, and it goes, we can talk, so the book also goes into exposures to different, different experiences and substances in the environment and in our food. Um, and and then it talks about the science of what those exposures are doing in our bodies and in our kids' bodies and
yeah,
even in bodies during pregnancy. But then like it ties that to these notions that, for instance, if you feed your kid fast food, or if you don't buy the chemical free home cleaning product, then your kid will end up with cancer or heart disease. Um, But that's, yeah, again, an easy way to put the onus on individuals when cancer and heart disease aren't actually caused by feeding
yeah.
your kid fast food. And it's just so much more complicated than that.
Or, yeah, why don't we put the onus on Monsanto or McDonald's or
Yeah.
I could go on and on and
And it
on.
talks about Monsanto, and it's so funny. I have like a funny, I can say, but not that funny, interesting personal history with Monsanto. But if you just Google my name in Monsanto, you'll find out about like um, how do you, okay, this is kind of off topic, but do you remember or know who Jordan Peterson is?
Oh, yes, I'm well aware of Jordan Peters.
Okay,
I think
so
I think so. He's
this is
he
relevant to Monsanto, I'm
he
telling you.
falls into the category of who dumb people think is smart. There's like a
Yeah.
there's he's God, he's a piece of shit.
But
He's
then he's
a
also like
he's a
pretty bigoted and
he's a bigot. His whole thing is he's on the all meat diet. uh he's all about hey, take responsibility for your own actions, be a man, blah 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 blah. And then he like went into a drug coma for like 2 years and was which is also like, I'm not, look,
yeah,
if
that is sad.
if you have a drug problem, that's totally fine. But if you have a drug problem and you're yelling at other people to not have a drug problem, then you're a hypocritical piece of shit. And that's my opinion on Jordan Peterson. I hand it back to you. I'm sorry.
Well, speaking of Twitter, he came for me on Twitter after I wrote about I used to cover biotechnology quite a bit, and also the discourse about what we call GMOs, or genetically modified organisms. And a few years ago, they had someone in the position at Monsanto. His title was the director of millennial engagement at Monsanto.
So
And
some PR guy.
yeah, and so they were hosting an event at the American Farm Bureau Federation conference, and I think this was 2017. Time doesn't make sense to me anymore,
Yeah.
especially since the pandemic. But so they were hosting this fireside chat for American farmers, and the director of millennial engagement felt very strongly in a positive way about Jordan Peterson and had like visited him at his home and everything, and invited Jordan Peterson to a fireside chat on farming and about like indoctrination of children. And I was like, what? Because one of my friends told me about this, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And I didn't even know who Jordan Peterson was. And then I quickly found out, and I'm like, okay, what? So I basically wrote about this, and it came out in Slate, and the title was something like, why is Monsanto inviting this alt-right hero to a fireside chat on farming? And you'll not believe some of the backlash was that the title of the story called him an alt-right hero. Like people took issue with that characterization, which
That's what he
it
is.
it was a whole thing. But this all comes back to yes, we should not. There are, of course, personal responsibilities that parents and others who are responsible for kids need to take. But in large part, the we put the onus on ourselves because of pressure from all directions when it really needs to be on, yeah, capitalism
Okay, I'm gonna take a
and
swig at this
system.
real quick. All right, everybody, after this, Google Kavin Senapathy, Jordan Peterson, Monsanto. I'm gonna go ahead and do my impression of what I think Jordan Peterson said without having any idea. Uh, Kevin does. She's a liberal shill, and you should only eat meat. And the Liver King is real, and he's not on steroids. And all men are losing their masculinity. And then he breaks into tears, and he cries for a while, mourning the loss of American masculinity. Am I right?
Mm,
Did I guess it? Did I guess his
really close, really close. But this will be, yeah, this will
for
be a good
for anyone
cliffhanger.
that for anyone that hasn't heard Jordan Peterson's voice, I nailed that just now, by the way.
Yes. Yeah, and I had to watch a lot of videos of him talking to
Ugh.
write this story. But that was one of the most memorable writings and internet experiences I've ever had. But yeah, yeah. And also, if anyone's wondering, I've been rubbing my arm here because I have like a sunburn and it's distracting me, but please don't mind it.
Okay. Um, well, shit, let's just get into one more thing. And like, there's, a lot of talking points, but just one, just not to completely skip over it because it's important and it's also really really difficult as a parent when you talk about race and racism, and if you especially if you really truly believe yourself to be a person who um, is on the right side of things. But how do you navigate in a world where there is so much just virulent and powerful racism, white supremacy, and to the point where it's depressing? You feel like you almost can't do anything as a parent. How are like what are you trying to like? How are you trying to give your child the knowledge, regardless of what your race is? Like
Yeah, that's a huge question, and the book spends a whole chapter on it, and I'm really just glad I got to do this and delve into it. But there are a few things we can do. First, we got to dismantle and the book quotes a lot several scholars and others who have talked about this so well, but we kind of have to let go of this idea of racist versus not racist, and this notion of a racist being someone, wearing a pointy hood and shouting racial slurs at people. Racism is much more subtle than that, and it's being anti-racist isn't, we can't think of it as an identity, but more of not only a worldview, but a series of actions. So Ibram X. Kendi has said something to the effect of nobody is anti-racist. It comes down to their behavior in the moment. And again, I'm paraphrasing, but then it also comes down again to our view of humanity and what it is. People kind of, without realizing it, believe that there are kind of biological genome deep differences between people of different races, and you hear that race is a social construct. But again, that's something that most people just have a nebulous idea of what that means. So the
Hmm.
book goes into into how race was actually constructed by human beings. And when you look at people's genomes, you can't say that they are one ethnicity or another, and we think that there are ideas in medicine, and medical students are even taught that there are biological differences between our races, so that our the vessels of our blood vessels are kind of different sizes, or our bones are
Are
certain
are they basing that on
bones are
on
bigger.
like sickle cell anemia? Or is that like, I mean, is that where
Yes,
that
so
came
so that's
from? Or
that's a great example. It's funny because I don't think you've read the book, which I like because I like being just interviewed about these ideas. But the book talks about sickle cell as this example of the idea that racial difference is genetic. So we
yeah,
are told that sickle cell is a Black disease, and I'm actually just working on an assignment for a magazine about sickle cell as well. But the book talks about sickle cell as an example that has led us astray in the way we think about race and ethnicity. So to your
so
question, how to deal with the questions of race and ethnicity as a parent, it's a complex question, and the book doesn't completely answer it. I certainly don't pretend to have all the answers. I just kind of lay out what I see as the landscape, social, scientific,
yeah,
and also talking to the people who are fighting against these ideologies.
yeah. And it's just extremely important not to be teaching medical students. I don't even know how to put this, but just like pseudoscience of that sort, that the blood
Right.
cells of someone who has a different like melanin amount, melanin in their
Yeah.
skin is different than someone else's, and therefore their blood cells or any other cells in their
Kidney
body.
function. I once saw a cardiologist and was talking to a resident, and the resident said, and he himself, so my parents are from India, and I believe that this doctor is South Asian, and he said something to me about how my blood vessels are probably more narrow as a South Asian person, and how this was relevant to my well-being. And I was like, actually,
Yeah,
and
based
so
on what?
if medical students are taught this,
Yeah,
it, just regular people, we are raised with a lot of misinformation masquerading as facts. So those are a few ways to kind of look at it as a parent, and also kind of let go of our defensiveness. And I give the example myself of maybe just a little over 10 years ago, I would say, without realizing it, that I was pretty transphobic. Like, I had some untrue ideas about sex and gender. And I remember talking, I was a blogger at the time, and our blog had a back channel where all of the bloggers kind of chatted about stuff. This was in the day of like Google, I forgot what it's called, but it was basically like a Google back channel. Um,
just kind of like a message board of some sort, or like a
yeah,
chat
anyway,
room.
there's this transgender scientist, and she is amazing. And I was asking kind of transphobic questions that I thought were scientific about chromosomes. And she very patiently explained it to me, within the context of genetics to an environment and all of the other factors we don't think about. Whereas another person also gender nonconforming, and ended up realizing I too am gender nonconforming. But anyhow, this person kind of yelled at me for asking these dehumanizing questions.
Yeah.
And that kind of, that stung for a while. And then I slowly started to learn that really learning is not about my own comfort, and like I haven't been stabbed, you know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
so I I learned to sit with discomfort, and I think we all need to do that, especially parents, but probably a good thing for everyone to be able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And man, and going back to your point about the blood cells and the races, I just if I ever have a doctor tell me that, like, well, because you're mostly Irish, your cells are that you need a certain amount of alcohol.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I'm willing to put up
Yeah.
with that kind of bullshit if the doctors then, if they're willing to prescribe me, like, like the tonic that still has cocaine in it and all that shit they
Mhm.
outlawed in like the 1900, the 1800s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. I mean,
I'm just
yeah.
kidding, guys. I'm not asking for cocaine. Unless you want to send it into the show, I would give it out to charity. All right, moving forward. There is a lot of content and theories out there about gentle parenting, uh, conscious parenting, etc. And also, there's a lot of critique that we might be over correcting as parents to make up for the fact that we are unpacking maybe our own traumas. Uh, what do you think is wrong with parenting advice you see these days, if anything? And I'm not suggesting that you have to necessarily find
Mhm.
anything wrong.
Yeah, again, as long as I think people are living within certain parameters and values, I'm not one to be pro or anti gentle parenting, although I think that gentle parenting has a few worthwhile tenets to think about. People often think that gentle parenting is about, like, letting your kid do whatever they want and like smear mud on the walls and stuff, but it's really just about talking things through, and there's a lot more to it. But we are unpacking our own trauma, and there are ways to do that where we can even explain it to our kids a little bit. Like, for instance, the book talks about fat phobia and all of the mythology surrounding fat and fatness and metabolism and obesity and BMI. But I grew up in the 90s when, like, I was just overhearing a conversation about this, but there was all this news that Kate Winslet in the Titanic was like chubby, like they cast a like a plus size overweight person, as if, first of all, if somebody is fat, that's an inherently very undesirable and bad thing that speaks to their character, but also our views of size were so very skewed back then. And
Yeah.
I've mentioned this to my kids, that I've had to relearn how to look at bodies and my own body, and to talk about food, for instance. I like to say personally, that I don't think that there's any such thing as inherently healthy or unhealthy food. It's just some food has certain nutrients and does certain things for your body and may make you feel a certain way. And
Yeah.
other foods do different things. And we need certain nutrients for various processes, so on and so forth. I'm personally a fan of some of the ideas behind intuitive eating, and certainly I've had to rethink my relationship to food, because really, like, I could go on. It was toxic in the 90s, especially for girls, and of course, like, the gender binary was so very reinforced and has been and still is to this day in a lot of ways. But that's all to say that when we're talking about parenting our kids, it's okay to be honest about processing trauma and dealing with what we went through, and also kind of looking over what they're learning in school and finding out if they do need any supplemental information and education. Like, for instance, when it comes to gender and sex and gender identity and our bodies, my kid's school district happens to be one of the best in terms of teaching the complexity and spectrum and about safety and consent, but some school districts are not going to, so it's worth kind of knowing and then finding material to supplement it. And the book talks more about how to do that as well.
Oh yeah. Well, I've first of all, I'm sorry, you still have me caught up on the fact I I guess I never witnessed or noticed the people saying Kate Winslet was fat in Titanic. But I was there in the 90s as well, and
It
that
was more
was
like the People magazine type of app, when it came out, like Kate
yeah.
Winslet was fat. Like, yeah, yeah. It depends on where you looked, but like if you
Yeah.
were reading those magazines that you could buy in the grocery store, like if you opened it up, like inside it was talking about how Kate Winslet was fat. And it's
The 90s had a very
Britney
oh,
Spears was considered fat, like at one point. I even
yes,
remember
yeah.
like one of my best gay friends, we were watching like TRL or something, and he was like, "Oh, Britney Spears got fat." In that one video where she's wearing the red jumpsuit and I mean, I think she looked beautiful, but when he said that, like that really struck me. I'm like, "Oh, he said that Britney got fat. She must be fat."
Not to talk like super out of pocket, but one of the things that I think society has really evolved in a way that I really appreciate is appreciating large butts on people and people of all genders. And I mean that large butts on women, large butts on men, large butts on people that are non-binary, what
Mhm.
have you. I think that's really great that is something that is so appreciated now, and it was not really that appreciated in the 90s, and I think that's one of the biggest flaws of that decade. People say it's the best decade, and I'm like, well,
It was certainly racist, but also like so there's an interesting history to the butts, but like I'm a fan of a big butt too because a muscular butt is beneficial in a lot of ways,
yeah,
like to living your best life.
and
So
also
yeah.
like just like if go back to your like um like your amygdala or whatever part of your brain, you see a big strong butt and you're like, that person can hunt, gather, and
Yeah.
really outrun a saber-tooth tiger. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm
And
probably
I've been
I'm
working on it too because I feel like working on the butt mass helps me regulate my blood sugar.
oh
So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and squats are like one of the easiest exercises in my opinion. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's not science. I'm 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 here at the end of this just drifting as far away from science as I possibly can. So
Yes.
I'm going to shut up.
And we're gonna go to the Flat Earth Conference.
And also, yeah,
I'm
and we're gonna,
interested.
yeah. But hey, guys, bef- before I say my next question for Kevin, I do want to say this: really, really skinny butts are cool too, and medium sized
Yes,
butts, all
all butts
types.
are great.
I I love them
I'm
all.
like the Tina Belcher school of thought. I don't know if you have watched Bob's Burgers, but people who have watched Bob's Burgers know how Tina feels about butts. So yeah.
Butts of all sizes are appreciated on this podcast, and in this house, we believe butts of all sizes are
Yeah.
beautiful, and we believe in science. Uh,
Yes.
Kevin, I have one last question for you. It's the most important question of the day. Where can people find you, follow you, and where can they get a copy of your new book, and when it's
Yes, the book
forthcoming?
is out August 6th, 2024. So currently, as we're recording this, it's available for pre-order. You can just search The Progressive Parent and my name, and the book should come up. It's on the publisher's website, HarperCollins.com. And you can also find me on my website, KavinSenapathy.com. Let me tell you, I don't know about Twitter. I'm currently still on it. If you're on it, I would love to have you follow me, but I don't know. I don't know how long I'm gonna last. I would say
Yeah.
my favorites are Instagram and Facebook. So yes,
Yeah.
yes. I'm
Yeah.
trying to get more. I used to be really into social media. Like I used to deeply kind of enjoy the communities there, and I'm trying to get back into it, but it's hard. I'm gonna try, but find me there.
Oh yeah. Um, Also, guys, I'm kicked off Facebook now, but I'm still on Instagram, so you can find me there. Uh, Kevin, it was such a pleasure meeting you. I can't wait till your book comes out. I'm gonna read it. I'm a dad now, so I need to know how to like, not become a liver king dad and be like, eat a bunch of liver, shoot a bunch of steroids, be a man. That's not what I'm trying to do. So thank
Yeah,
you so much for being on the show, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
thank you.